In the heart of Chicago, successful lawyer Mark Jenkins, marked by arrogance and prejudice, despises Malik Thompson, a young black man who yearns for recognition in a world that constantly tries to silence him. When Mark discovers that Malik is actually the son of one of his firm's most influential clients, his life takes an unexpected turn, forcing him to confront his own beliefs and the power dynamics that permeate his profession. Alongside Clara, his civil rights lawyer, Mark embarks on a journey of self-discovery and redemption, while Malik struggles to be seen for who he truly is. In the heart of Chicago, where the skyline pierced the clouds and the streets pulsed with life, Mark Jenkins sat in his opulent office, a world of polished mahogany and glass that reflected his success. The city hummed below, a stark contrast to the suffocating silence that filled the room as he stared disdainfully at the young man seated across from him. Malik Thompson, dressed in a crisp shirt and a tie that seemed to struggle against the weight of expectations, shifted nervously in his chair. His presence seemed to fill the space with an unspoken tension, a challenge to Mark's carefully curated world. Mark leaned back, arms crossed, his gaze unwavering. "You know, I don't have all day, Malik. If you're hoping for a favor, you might want to rethink your approach." The condescension dripped from his words like venom, a reflection of the arrogance that had propelled his career. Malik met Mark's gaze, trying to mask his frustration with a composed exterior. "I'm not asking for a favor, Mr. Jenkins. I just want a chance to prove my worth. I've worked hard, and I have ideas that could benefit your firm." His voice was steady, but the slight tremor betrayed the weight of his struggle. "Prove your worth," Mark scoffed, a smirk playing on his lips. "What do you think this is, a charity? You're not even in the door yet, and you're talking about benefits. You need to understand your place." The dismissiveness in his tone was palpable, and Malik felt a familiar sting of prejudice that had followed him throughout his life. In that moment, Malik's thoughts drifted back to the countless times he'd been overlooked, dismissed, and belittled. He could almost hear his mother's voice, encouraging him to persevere against the tide of indifference. "You have to fight for your voice, Malik," she had said. "Don't let them silence you." He took a deep breath, trying to summon the courage that had been instilled in him. "Mr. Jenkins," Malik began, determination sharpening his voice, "I may not have the same privileges as you, but that doesn't mean I don't have valuable insights. The world is changing, and I want to be part of that change, not just some statistic." Mark's expression hardened, his disdain deepening. "Statistics can be useful in business, Malik, but you need to realize that not everyone gets a trophy for trying. You have to earn your place." He leaned forward, intensity in his eyes. "And right now you're not even close." Malik's heart raced, but he refused to back down. "I understand the game, Mr. Jenkins. I'm not asking for handouts. I'm asking for an opportunity to show you that I can contribute." As the tension built, the door swung open and Clara, Mark's civil rights advocate assistant, stepped in. Her expression shifted from casual to concerned as she observed the charged atmosphere. "Is everything okay in here?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with concern. Mark shot her a glance, irritation flickering across his face. "We're just having a discussion about Malik's ambitions," he replied, the sarcasm evident in his tone. Clara turned her attention to Malik, sensing the injustice in the air. "Malik, I believe you have ideas worth hearing. Your perspective is important. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Her supportive words felt like a lifeline in a stormy sea. Mark shifted uncomfortably, irritation bubbling beneath the surface. "We'll see if those ideas hold any merit," he muttered, dismissing Clara's encouragement with a wave of his hand. But as Malik rose to leave, a sudden realization struck him. The meeting had been an exercise in futility, but perhaps it wasn't the end. As he stepped into the bustling street, the wind tousling his hair, he thought of his mother's words once more. He would not allow himself to be defined by Mark's prejudice. The fight was only beginning. Meanwhile, back in the office, Mark stared out at the city, his mind racing. He had dismissed Malik as just another kid seeking validation, but in the back of his mind, a nagging thought lingered. What if he was wrong? After the meeting, Malik could feel a storm brewing inside him. The disappointment from Mark's presentation still stung, and the realization that the arrogant lawyer's disdain was directed not just at him, but at the very essence of who he was, ignited a fire of determination. He stepped into the hallway, taking a deep breath before striding toward Mark's office. Mark was still seated at his desk, papers scattered around him like fallen leaves. He barely glanced up as Malik entered, a frown etched on his face. "What do you want?" Mark snapped, his voice dripping with annoyance. Malik's heart raced, but he held his ground. "I need to talk to you about what just happened in there." His voice was steady, but it took everything in him to keep it that way. "About what? The presentation? I'm sure you have plenty of thoughts, but I don't have time for a lecture from you." Mark leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, a clear sign that he was bracing himself against any confrontation. Malik took a step closer, meeting Mark's gaze with unwavering intensity. "It's not just about the presentation. It's about respect. You spoke as if you were addressing a subordinate, someone who doesn't deserve to be heard. You have no idea what I've fought through to get where I am today." Mark's eyebrows shot up, surprised by Malik's boldness. "And what would you know about the legal world? You've barely scratched the surface." "Exactly." Malik shot back, his voice rising. That's precisely the problem. You see me as just another young black man who doesn't belong, but I'm more than that. I'm here because I deserve to be, and your attitude only reinforces the barriers that keep people like me from succeeding. The tension in the air crackled as Mark processed Malik's words. For the first time, he felt a flicker of uncertainty. You don't understand the pressures I'm under, he said defensively, trying to reassert control. I have clients to please, and they don't care about your personal struggles. Then maybe it's time you start caring, Malik replied, his voice softer but no less firm. Your clients are people too, and they should want to support inclusion and equity. You have the power to change things, but you're too blinded by your own arrogance to see it. Mark's posture shifted slightly. The walls he had built around himself were starting to feel less impenetrable. He opened his mouth to respond, but the words caught in his throat. Malik's confrontation was not just an accusation, it was a challenge that forced him to confront the very foundation of his beliefs. Just then, Clara entered the scene, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. She had seen the heated exchange from a distance and felt compelled to intervene. Is everything okay here? She asked, her eyes darting between the two men. Malik turned to Clara, relief washing over him. I was just trying to explain to Mark how important respect is in our profession. He seems to have lost sight of that. Clara nodded, sensing the tension in the room. Mark, you need to listen. Malik has a point. This isn't just about business, it's about human connection. Your treatment of him reflects a mindset that's outdated. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I'm not a racist, he protested, but his voice lacked conviction. I never said you were, Malik interjected, but your actions speak louder than words. You need to recognize the privilege you hold and how it affects your interactions. It's time to open your eyes. As Clara moved closer to Malik, offering silent support, Mark felt an internal struggle. The email notification pinged on his computer, pulling him back to reality. He glanced at the screen and saw a message from the influential businessman, asking him to meet with Malik regarding a social project. This was the dilemma Mark had been avoiding, an opportunity to change the narrative, to make amends, or to sink deeper into his arrogance. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him, the crossroads of self-preservation and the potential for genuine growth. Maybe I should rethink some things, Mark muttered, mostly to himself as he stared at the email. Malik and Clara exchanged glances, a mix of hope and skepticism lingering in the air. The time had come for Mark to either step up or step back, and in that moment, the future of their interactions hung delicately in the balance. In the dimly lit confines of his office, Mark Jenkins paced back and forth, his mind a whirlwind of frustration and confusion. The meeting had not gone as he had expected, and the revelation that Malik Thompson was the son of one of his firm's most influential clients left him rattled. He leaned against his mahogany desk, running a hand through his hair, his thoughts racing. It was then that Clara, his civil rights advocate assistant, entered the room, sensing the turbulence in the air. Mark, she began, her voice steady and calm. You seem off today. What's going on? Mark stopped pacing and turned to face her. Did you hear how Malik confronted me after the meeting? He had the audacity to question my vision, my respect for him. His voice dripped with indignation, but Clara could see the cracks in his armor. Maybe he was right to confront you, she replied, crossing her arms. You've never really taken the time to see him beyond what you want to see. You've judged him without understanding his story. I don't need a lecture, Clara, Mark snapped, but there was an undercurrent of uncertainty in his tone. I'm just trying to do my job. Your job shouldn't come at the cost of treating people with respect, Clara pressed. You see Malik as a threat, but he's a person trying to find his place in a world that's constantly pushing him down. You need to rethink how you see him. Mark fell silent, her words echoing in his mind. He had always prided himself on being a hard-nosed lawyer, a man who didn't let emotions cloud his judgment. But now, confronted with the reality of his prejudices, he felt a pang of guilt for the way he had dismissed Malik. Meanwhile, across town, Malik was preparing for the charity event that would showcase his work advocating for inclusion and opportunities for young people. As he stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie, he couldn't shake the tumult of emotions swirling within him. Would it be worth it to meet with Mark again? The thought of collaborating with someone who had dismissed him so readily was daunting. Mom always said to be the bigger person, he muttered to himself, recalling his mother's encouraging words. Yet, the pressure of being the businessman's son weighed heavily on him, making him question his choices. Should I just go my own way? He pondered, uncertainty gnawing at him. That evening, as he took the stage at the charity event, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. The audience was a sea of faces, and as he looked out at them, he felt a surge of determination. This is my moment, he told himself. He stepped up to the microphone, his heart racing, and began to speak about his experiences, the challenges he faced, and the importance of inclusion for young people who felt sidelined. Every young person deserves a chance, he declared passionately, his voice resonating with truth. We need to create a space where everyone is valued regardless of their background. The crowd listened intently, captivated by his eloquence and strength. Mark, standing at the back of the room, felt a wave of admiration wash over him. For the first time, he saw Malik not just as an obstacle but as a powerful voice advocating for change. As Malik concluded his speech, he was met with thunderous applause. He stepped down from the stage, a sense of control and recognition washing over him. He had stood tall, and for once he felt seen. Mark approached him, his expression a mixture of respect and hesitation. "Malik," he said, extending a hand, "that was incredible. I'd like to talk about working together on a social initiative. I believe we can make a real difference." Malik hesitated, suspicion flickering in his eyes. "Why should I trust you?" he asked, his voice steady but edged with caution. "You've shown me nothing but disdain." Mark took a deep breath, realizing that this was a moment of truth for both of them. "I know I have a lot to prove, but I want to change. I want to be part of the solution, not the problem." The tension hung in the air as Malik weighed his options. This was a pivotal moment, and the outcome could shape not only their futures but the very narrative of inclusion and empathy that they were both striving for. Mark Jenkins stood at the back of the grand hall, his eyes fixed on Malik Thompson as he took the stage for the charity event. The room was filled with people, all eyes on the young man who had captivated them with his presence. Malik's voice resonated with passion and conviction, speaking about inclusion and the opportunities that should be available for everyone regardless of their background. Mark felt a strange mix of admiration and discomfort as he watched Malik articulate his thoughts with such strength. "Every young person deserves a chance to be heard," Malik declared, his hands gesturing emphatically. "We are not just statistics. We are dreams, ambitions, and potential waiting to be unleashed. Let us break the barriers that hold us back." As the applause erupted, Mark felt an awakening within himself. He recalled his own arrogance, the judgments he had made about Malik based solely on prejudice and appearances. A sense of shame washed over him. How could he have dismissed someone so extraordinary, someone whose life experiences he had never bothered to understand? The realization hit him hard. Malik was not just the son of a client. He was a voice for many, including those who had struggled in silence. After the speech, the crowd began to disperse, but a group of young people surrounded Malik, eager to hear more of his story. Their faces lit up with inspiration, a stark contrast to the indifference Mark often encountered in his professional life. Malik's confidence radiated, and for the first time, he felt in control of his narrative. He was no longer defined by his circumstances but by his ability to inspire and lead. "Your story is so powerful," one young woman said, her eyes gleaming with admiration. "I've faced so many obstacles, and hearing you speak gives me hope." Malik smiled, his heart swelling with a sense of accomplishment. "Thank you. I believe we all have a story to tell. It's important that we share them and support one another." As the crowd began to thin, Mark made his way toward Malik, his heart pounding with a mix of nervousness and hope. He had so much to say, yet doubt crept in. Would Malik even want to hear him out after their previous encounters? Yet, there was a newfound determination within him. He needed to acknowledge the young man's strength and offer his support. "Malik," Mark began, his voice steady yet softer than he expected. "That was an incredible speech. You have a gift for communication. I've never seen anyone command a room like you did tonight." Malik looked up, surprise etched across his face. "Thank you, Mark. It means a lot coming from you, but I'm also aware of how you viewed me before." There was a challenge in his tone, one that Mark knew he had to address. "I know I've made mistakes," he admitted, his gaze sincere. "I've let my biases cloud my judgment. I want to change that. I'd like to discuss working together on a social initiative. I think we could do something impactful." Malik's expression turned cautious. He took a moment to consider Mark's words, weighing the sincerity they carried. "Why should I trust you? You've been dismissive and condescending. What's different now?" Mark took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his past choices heavy on his shoulders. "I realize now that I've been part of the problem. I've seen the consequences of my actions, and I want to be part of the solution. I know it won't be easy to earn your trust, but I'm willing to put in the work." Malik studied Mark's face, searching for any hint of insincerity. He saw a man who was visibly shaken by the evening's events, a man who was perhaps beginning to understand the gravity of his previous attitudes, but the scars of their past interactions were still fresh. "I appreciate your offer," Malik replied carefully, "but I need time to think about it. Trust isn't built overnight." Mark nodded, understanding the hesitance in Malik's voice. "Take all the time you need. Just know that I'm here, ready to listen and learn." As Mark walked away, he felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. He had made a step towards accountability, and perhaps, just perhaps, he could forge a path toward genuine change, both for himself and for Malik. Malik Thompson sat across from Mark Jenkins in the sleek conference room, the tension palpable in the air. After a moment of silence, he shifted in his chair, his expression a mixture of skepticism and cautious hope. "I'm willing to give this a shot, Mark," he said, his voice steady but guarded, "but I want to make sure we're truly working towards something meaningful, not just checking boxes for appearances." Mark leaned back, processing Malik's words. The weight of his own past arrogance loomed large in his mind. "I understand," he replied, attempting to sound sincere, and I want this project to be different. I want it to be real. He paused, searching for the right words. It's about inclusion in the legal industry. We can create pathways for those who've been overlooked or dismissed. Malik's brow furrowed as he considered Mark's proposition. He wasn't ready to trust yet. Creating pathways is great, but how do we ensure that the people we're trying to help actually see this as a genuine opportunity? I've been on the receiving end of token gestures before. Mark could feel the walls he had built around himself starting to crack. You're right. We need to involve the community in the planning process. I want to hear their voices, their needs. His eyes locked onto Malik's. We can't do this without their input. As they began brainstorming ideas, Clara Martinez, Mark's assistant, watched from the doorway, her expression conflicted. She had seen the evolution of their dynamic from a distance, but doubt lingered in her mind. Was Mark truly changing? Or was this just another facade? With a sigh, she stepped into the room, interrupting their conversation. Sorry to interrupt, but I couldn't help but overhear, Clara said, her tone cautious but curious. Malik, I think it's essential to ensure that this project isn't just a way for Mark to redeem himself. He needs to understand that real change requires commitment, not just words. Mark bristled slightly at her implication. I'm not looking for redemption, Clara. I'm looking to make a difference. He turned back to Malik, trying to convey sincerity. I want to work alongside you, not above you. This project needs your vision, your experience. Malik studied Mark's face, searching for any hint of insincerity. After a long pause, he nodded slowly. All right, let's outline what this project could look like. But I need to be clear. I won't hesitate to walk away if I feel this is just another corporate initiative without real substance. Fair enough, Mark replied, his voice firm. Let's set a meeting with community leaders and get their thoughts. We can start drafting a proposal that reflects their needs. As they began to jot down ideas, Clara remained skeptical. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed, observing the two men. Just remember, Mark, she interjected, people can sense authenticity. If you're genuine, they'll feel it. But if this is just about saving face, you're going to lose their trust, and Malik's too. Malik glanced at Clara, appreciating her protective nature. I'm not here to play games. This is personal for me. I want to see real change, not just another initiative that fades away after a few months. Mark nodded, feeling the weight of their expectations settle on his shoulders. I get it. You have my word that I'll put in the effort. Let's make this a collaboration that truly matters. Yet, as the meeting progressed, the air shifted. Mark presented an ambitious plan, outlining various initiatives designed to promote inclusion in the legal field. However, as he spoke, Malik's expression grew more skeptical. Mark, Malik interrupted, his tone shifting from cooperative to confrontational. This all sounds great on paper, but I can't participate if I feel like you're just trying to make headlines for yourself. I need to know that your heart is in this, not just your reputation. Mark felt a pang of frustration but kept his voice steady. I'm asking for your trust. This is about making a difference, not about me. Malik shook his head, disappointment flickering in his eyes. I don't think you understand. If it comes off as disingenuous, that's exactly what will happen. Clara watched the exchange closely, feeling the tension rise. Maybe we need to step back and rethink how we present this, she suggested, her voice a calming presence in the heated discussion. Let's focus on what the community needs first, and then we can frame it in a way that's genuine and impactful. Mark sighed, contemplating Clara's words. He realized they had a long way to go, and the path to redemption would not be easy. All right, let's take a step back and refocus, he conceded, looking at Malik with renewed determination. I promise I'll prove that I can be an ally in this journey. The weight of their shared mission hung in the air, a fragile bond beginning to form amidst the uncertainty. As the sun began to set over Chicago, casting a warm golden glow through the tall glass windows of Malik's modest office, he sat at his desk, contemplating the weight of his recent experiences. The community event he had just attended echoed in his mind, where he had spoken passionately about inclusion and opportunities for marginalized youth. Yet, beneath his confidence, a nagging doubt lingered. He could feel the pressure of expectations bearing down on him, not just as the son of a powerful client, but as a figure of hope for many who felt voiceless in a world that often overlooked them. Malik leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. The phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was Clara, Mark's assistant and a staunch civil rights advocate. They had developed a rapport over the past few weeks, and he appreciated her straightforwardness. Hey Malik, she greeted, her voice warm yet direct. I know you're busy, but can we talk? It's about Mark. Sure, Clara. What's on your mind? Malik replied, trying to mask the tension in his voice. I've been observing him, and I think he's struggling with some of the things you've both discussed. But I'm concerned about how genuine his intentions really are, she said, her tone shifting to one of caution. I want to make sure you're protecting yourself. Malik paused, the words hitting closer to home than he expected. I get that he's trying to change, but can people really change overnight? He still carries that arrogance. I feel it every time we talk. I know. But remember, change takes time, and it's often uncomfortable, Clara replied. You have to trust your instincts. If you think he's being insincere, don't hesitate to call him out. You deserve authenticity, especially from someone in his position. Thanks, Clara. I'll keep that in mind, Malik said, his mind spinning with thoughts. He hung up, feeling a mix of gratitude and apprehension. Meanwhile, in his sleek office, Mark Jenkins sat alone, grappling with his recent encounters with Malik. The reflections of their confrontations replayed in his mind like a film he couldn't pause. He leaned over his desk, staring at a stack of documents that suddenly seemed trivial compared to the moral dilemmas swirling around him. "Why can't I just see things clearly?" he muttered to himself, rubbing his temples in frustration. "I've spent years building this image, and now it feels like it's all crumbling." As if in answer, Clara entered the office, her expression a mix of concern and determination. "Mark, can we talk?" she said, closing the door behind her. "Sure, Clara." "What's bothering you?" he asked, leaning back in his chair, trying to project an air of calm. "It's about Malik. I can see that you're trying, but you need to understand the impact of your actions. He's not just some project for you to take on. He's a person with a story, and you've dismissed him in the past," Clara said, her voice firm but compassionate. Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I know I messed up, Clara. It's just hard to navigate this world when I've spent so long at the top, looking down. He's so passionate and I can't help but feel intimidated." "Then let that intimidation guide you to humility. You need to admit where you've gone wrong," Clara advised. "It's about understanding, not just checking boxes. You're a lawyer, Mark. The law isn't just about rules, it's about people. I want to be better. I want to help him," Mark said, his voice dropping to a whisper as he reflected on his motivations. "But what if my past actions overshadow my intentions? What if he never trusts me?" "Then you have to earn that trust, step by step," Clara replied, her tone softening. "It won't happen overnight, but it can start with honesty. You need to confront your own prejudices openly. That's where the real work begins." Mark nodded, a newfound determination settling in his chest. "You're right. I've been avoiding the hard truths about myself. I need to confront my past, not just for Malik but for myself too." Meanwhile, Malik sat in his office, staring out at the cityscape, the skyline glimmering in the fading light. He felt the weight of his aspirations pressing down on him, a blend of hope and fear. He wondered if he could truly trust Mark. Could someone so entrenched in privilege understand the struggles of those he had previously dismissed? In the quiet of his office, he whispered to himself, maybe it's time to take a leap of faith. The conference room was suffused with tension as Mark Jenkins sat at the head of the long table, his fingers drumming nervously against the polished surface. He had just received a call from a powerful client, Victor Lang, a man known for his ruthless business tactics and connections that reached far beyond the legal world. Mark had always admired Lang's success but had never fully appreciated the moral compromises that came with it. As he stared at the blank sheet of paper before him, the weight of his conscience pressed down harder than ever. "Mark," Clara's voice broke through his reverie. She stood at the door, her brow furrowed with concern. "What's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Victor wants to discuss the inclusion project," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "He's not thrilled about the direction it's taking." Clara stepped further into the room, crossing her arms as she leaned against the wall. "You know he's not a fan of social initiatives that don't directly benefit him. What's he asking you to do?" Mark hesitated, his mind racing through the implications of the conversation he'd had moments before. "He's suggesting we put a hold on it. He believes it's a distraction from our core business, that it's bad for our image." "Bad for your image?" Clara scoffed. "What about the good it could do? You're the one who wanted to change how this firm operates." I know, Mark replied, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "But he's right about one thing. This project could jeopardize our standing with other influential clients. I can't just throw away my career." "Your career or your integrity?" Clara challenged, her eyes narrowing. "You've been talking about making a difference, about standing up for what's right. Are you really willing to throw that away for a few bucks?" Mark remained silent, grappling with the weight of her words. He remembered Malik's face, the passion in his voice during that charity event, and the way he had stood up for what he believed in. But the thought of jeopardizing everything he had worked for gnawed at him. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to Mark, Malik was grappling with his own crisis. He sat in a small cafe, nursing a cup of coffee while staring out the window. His mind was a whirlwind of thoughts about his mother, who had just lost her job due to a discriminatory scheme orchestrated by a company with ties to the influential businessman Mark worked for. The news had hit him hard, and he felt torn between fighting back and allowing himself to be crushed by the weight of the injustice. As he tapped his fingers on the table, he replayed his mother's words in his mind, "You have to stand up for what's right, no matter what." But what did that mean for him now? Should he confront the powerful figures behind the discrimination, or would that put him at further risk? Malik picked up his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found Clara's number. With a deep breath, he pressed dial. "Clara, it's Malik. Can we talk?" "Of course, Malik. What's on your mind?" Clara's voice was warm and inviting, reassuring him that he wasn't alone. "I just found out my mom lost her job because of that discrimination scheme," Malik said, his voice trembling. "I don't know what to do. I want to fight, but it feels like I'm up against an army." "Listen, you're not alone in this," Clara assured him. "Mark is struggling too. He's facing pressure from Victor right now about the inclusion project. I think he genuinely wants to help, but he's scared." "Scared?" Malik scoffed, bitterness creeping into his voice. It's easy to be scared when you've never had to deal with real consequences. I don't trust him. Trust is hard to earn, especially when people have hurt you, Clara replied. But maybe this is a chance for both of you to change. You have a voice, Malik, and it matters. If you can confront the situation head-on, you might inspire others to do the same. Malik sighed, feeling the weight of Clara's words. You're right. I can't let my mom's situation go unanswered. But how do I get through to Mark? I can't shake off the feeling that he's just trying to redeem himself. I'll help you, Clara said, her determination palpable. Let's set up a time to meet. You can talk to him and I'll be there to support you. As they hung up, both Malik and Mark found themselves at a crossroads. They faced formidable challenges rooted in their pasts, but the possibility of mutual understanding loomed ahead. Mark wrestled with the ethical implications of his choices, while Malik prepared to confront a world that had too often tried to silence him. Their paths were intertwined, and the decisions they were about to make would not only shape their futures but also redefine the very core of their identities. In the dimly lit community center, the air was thick with anticipation. Malik stood before a small group of young people, their eyes wide with eagerness and curiosity. It was time to act. He had spent countless nights tossing and turning, grappling with the weight of his mother's unfair dismissal and the discrimination that pervaded their lives. Today he would channel that frustration into something constructive. All right, everyone, Malik began, his voice steady but passionate. I want to create a movement, something that can actually make a difference in our community and beyond. We've all faced challenges, whether it's in the workplace or in our everyday lives. It's time we come together and fight back against discrimination. Who's with me? A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, and Malik could see the determination in their faces. He felt a surge of motivation swell within him. He continued, we can start by sharing our stories, spreading awareness about the issues we face, and creating a network of support. Together, we can be the change we want to see. As he spoke, a young woman named Jasmine raised her hand hesitantly. But what if no one listens to us? What can we really do to make an impact? Malik took a moment to consider her question. I get that. It's easy to feel powerless, but think about it. Every big movement started with just a few people willing to speak up. We need to use social media, organize events, and reach out to local leaders. We can make our voices heard. The group erupted in a flurry of suggestions, each member eager to contribute. Malik felt a spark of hope. They were brainstorming ideas, planning their first actions, and suddenly the weight on his shoulders felt a little lighter. Later that evening, Malik decided to reach out to Clara. He dialed her number, his heart racing with the potential of what they could accomplish together. When she answered, her voice was bright, yet he could feel her curiosity. Hey, Malik, how's everything going? Clara, I need your help, he replied, urgency clear in his tone. I want to start a social movement focused on fighting workplace discrimination. I've gathered some young people who are ready to take action, but I could really use your expertise. There was a pause on the other end, and he could almost hear her thinking. That sounds incredible. I'd love to help. What do you have in mind? First, we need to get organized. I'm thinking we can plan a community event, maybe a rally or a forum where people can share their experiences. It'll help us build a network and attract attention, Malik explained, excitement building in his voice. I can assist with logistics and outreach, Clara offered. We can draft a press release, contact local news stations. This can be big, Malik. Exactly, he exclaimed, his optimism contagious. I want to show everyone that we're not just victims. We're fighters. We deserve a seat at the table. Let's do it. I'll gather some contacts and we can meet up to strategize, Clara replied. As they hung up, Malik felt a renewed sense of purpose. He headed back to the community center, where the group was still buzzing with ideas. They discussed potential names for the movement, and after much debate, they settled on Voices Unbound. It felt powerful and fitting, a name that encapsulated their mission to break free from the shackles of prejudice and discrimination. Days turned into weeks, and Malik poured himself into the planning. They secured a venue for their first event, a local park that had seen its fair share of protests and gatherings. Posters were printed, social media accounts created, and a sense of camaraderie blossomed among the group. With Clara's help, they reached out to community leaders and activists, inviting them to join their cause. On the day of the event, Malik stood at the front of the park, feeling the adrenaline rush through him as he looked out at the crowd that had gathered. It was a diverse group, young and old, different backgrounds, all united for a common purpose. He stepped up to the microphone, heart pounding in his chest. Thank you all for being here today. We are here to share our stories, to stand together against discrimination, and to demand change. Malik's voice echoed, filled with passion. Today marks the beginning of something special, a movement that fights for our rights and champions inclusion for everyone. As he spoke, he could see Clara in the crowd, beaming with pride. The energy was electric, and Malik felt a sense of belonging he had longed for. This was more than just a fight for recognition. It was a fight for dignity, for humanity, and for a future where everyone could thrive without the burden of prejudice weighing them down. In that moment, he knew they were on the brink of something transformative. As the sun dipped below the Chicago skyline, casting a warm glow over the city, Malik Thompson sat in a small coffee shop, a steaming cup in front of him. He had just returned from a community meeting where people had shared their stories of discrimination and resilience. The weight of his role as a catalyst for change hung heavily on his shoulders, but he felt invigorated. Yet, as he scrolled through his phone, a notification caught his eye, a message from Clara, Mark Jenkins' assistant. "Malik, I have something important to discuss. Can we meet?" Curiosity piqued, Malik replied with a simple acknowledgement, his mind racing with thoughts about Mark. He had been grateful for the recent donation to the inclusion movement but couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. He had always been cautious around Mark, whose transformation felt too sudden, too convenient. Later that evening, Clara arrived, her expression a mix of concern and determination. As they settled at a corner table, she leaned in, her voice low. "Malik, I wanted to talk to you about Mark's donation." "What about it?" Malik asked, his brow furrowing. "It's significant, but it's anonymous. He hasn't taken credit, which is unusual for him. I think he's trying to prove something, but I'm not sure if it's genuine." Malik shrugged, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. "I appreciate the help, but I can't help but feel it's all part of his redemption arc. I don't want to be a pawn in his game." Clara nodded, understanding his skepticism. "I get that, but he's struggling too. He's trying to understand what he did wrong. Maybe he should have thought about that before he treated me like I was invisible," Malik replied, bitterness creeping into his tone. Clara sighed, her eyes softening. "People can change, Malik. It's not easy, but sometimes it takes a catalyst to push them in the right direction." Malik leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "It's hard to trust someone who's spent their life benefiting from the system that oppressed others. How do I know he isn't just trying to save his own skin?" "I can't promise you anything, but perhaps you should talk to him. Give him a chance to explain himself," Clara suggested, her voice firm yet gentle. Malik considered her words. Just then his phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Mark. "Malik, I'd like to meet. There's something I need to discuss with you." Malik hesitated. He could feel the tension between them like a taut string ready to snap. "I don't know, Clara. I'm not sure if I'm ready to face him." "Sometimes, confronting our fears is the only way to move forward," Clara encouraged. After a moment of silence, Malik nodded. "All right, I'll meet him, but I'm not making any promises." The next day, Malik walked into the upscale office building where Mark worked, his palms slightly sweaty. The sleek architecture and polished floors felt alien to him, a stark reminder of the world he often felt excluded from. He was ushered into Mark's office, where the lawyer stood, his expression a mixture of anticipation and apprehension. "Malik," Mark began, his voice steady but laced with an undercurrent of tension. "Thanks for coming. Let's cut to the chase, Mark. What do you want?" Malik replied, crossing his arms defensively. Mark took a deep breath, gathering his thoughts. "I wanted to talk about the donation. I know it doesn't erase the past, but I thought it could help. I'm trying to support the movement and make amends." Malik narrowed his eyes, skepticism etched on his face. "Is this just about your guilt, or do you genuinely want to help?" Mark's face fell slightly, realizing the weight of Malik's words. "It's both, honestly. I've spent too long ignoring the very real issues that people like you face. I want to understand and do better." Malik shook his head, frustration bubbling to the surface. "Then why do I feel like you're just trying to polish your image? What's to stop you from pulling out the rug from under me again?" "Because I'm not the same person I was before," Mark insisted, his voice rising slightly. "I'm trying to change, but I need your help to do it." "Help?" Malik scoffed. "You want my help after everything? You want me to trust you?" "Trust doesn't come easy, I know that," Mark replied, his tone softer now, "but I'm willing to prove myself. I want to work together on something meaningful. It's not about me anymore, it's about creating real change." Malik studied Mark's face, searching for any hint of insincerity. "You say that, but how do I know this isn't just another way for you to save face?" "I can't make you believe me," Mark admitted, his gaze earnest, "but I'm committed to this movement, and I want to support you in whatever way I can." Malik felt the tension in the room shift slightly, but doubt still lingered. "You have a long way to go, Mark, and if you're not genuine, I won't hesitate to call you out." Mark nodded, accepting the challenge. "I wouldn't expect anything less." As Malik turned to leave, he glanced back at Mark one last time. "Just know that I'll be watching you closely. If you betray that trust, there will be consequences." With that, Malik walked out of the office, feeling a mix of uncertainty and resolve. The road ahead was fraught with challenges, but for the first time he felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, change was possible, even for someone like Mark Jenkins. As the sun dipped below the Chicago skyline, casting long shadows over the city, the tension between Mark and Malik reached a boiling point. Mark sat in his office, the weight of the world heavy on his shoulders. He stared blankly at the wall, a file on the influential businessman Mr. Harrison spread before him. The documents revealed a web of corruption and discrimination that ran through the very heart of the firm he worked for. Mark's hands trembled as he ran them through his hair, his mind racing. How did I not see this before? He muttered to himself, the realization crashing over him like a wave. He thought of Malik and the journey they had taken together. The young man had been nothing but honest and forthright, yet Mark had only seen him through the lens of his own privilege and prejudice. Now he felt a deep sense of shame wash over him. Just then Clara knocked on the door and walked in, her expression serious. "Mark, we need to talk. I've heard some disturbing things about Mr. Harrison," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "I know. I just found out," Mark replied, his voice strained. "He's been taking advantage of his position, and it's all tied to that discrimination scheme Malik's mother was a victim of." Clara frowned, crossing her arms. "You have to confront him, Mark. If you don't, you're complicit in his actions. And what about Malik? How do you think he would react if he finds out you knew and did nothing?" Mark's heart raced. The thought of Malik discovering his inaction terrified him. "I need to think carefully about how to handle this," he said, his mind racing with the implications. Meanwhile, Malik stood at the community center, surrounded by young people eager to hear his story. He had become a symbol of hope and resilience, but the pressure was mounting. As he prepared to address the crowd, he couldn't shake the feeling of apprehension. The weight of being Mr. Harrison's son loomed over him, a constant reminder of the expectations that accompanied his identity. After the event, Malik received a text from Mark asking to meet. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach. What could he possibly want now? He murmured to himself. After everything that's happened, can I really trust him? When they met, the air was thick with tension. Mark cleared his throat, his voice shaky. "Malik, I need to talk to you about something important," he began, his eyes searching Malik's for understanding. "Important? After everything? You think you can just waltz in and act like we're friends?" Malik shot back, his voice laced with bitterness. "You've done nothing but undermine my worth." Mark flinched at the accusation but pressed on. "I found out that Mr. Harrison has a history of corruption and discrimination. I want to take a stand against him, but I need your help." Malik's expression hardened. "Why should I believe you? You've only ever seen me as a client's son. What's changed?" Mark took a deep breath, the weight of his guilt pressing heavily on him. "I've realized how blind I've been. I've been part of the problem and I want to make it right. I need you to trust me, even if it's just a little." "Trust you? You think it's that easy?" Malik replied, his voice rising. "You don't get to just flip a switch and suddenly be the ally. It doesn't work that way." Mark's heart sank. "I know, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I can't stand by and let Harrison's actions go unchecked. This could help others like your mother." Malik's anger simmered down slightly, replaced by doubt. "What's your plan? You'll just go against a powerful man without a backup?" "I have Claire on my side and we can gather evidence. We can expose him together," Mark urged, desperation creeping into his tone. Malik crossed his arms, contemplating the offer. "And what's in it for you? Your reputation? Your career? Honestly, I don't care about that anymore. I just want to do the right thing," Mark admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Malik studied him, searching for any sign of deceit. "You say that, but actions speak louder than words. Prove it." Mark nodded, determination flooding him. "I will. I promise." As Malik walked away, he felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He was torn between a desire for revenge against the system that had wronged him and the potential for forgiveness that Mark now offered. But as he stepped out into the cool night air, he felt a flicker of hope, a chance to redefine their relationship, to fight the injustices that had plagued them both. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, it felt like it could also be a path toward healing.